Welcome back to Music Student 101. In episode 45, Secondary Dominance Part 1, we took our first steps necessary to ascend the mountain of chromaticism on the horizon. Today, we will cover the 5 of 2, the 5 of 6, and the 5 of 3. Engage your theory brain with your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
You know something, Matt?
What's up, Jeremy?
I'm actually kind of happy to be inside today.
Oh, well, it is hot out.
It is hot. It is Alabama hot.
It is Alabama hot, which is a special kind of hot.
The muggiest of muggies.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
We had this crazy storm a couple of days ago. You know how normally the jet stream, the storms kind of typically, the weather goes from it whooshes down from the northwest.
Right.
And swings down through the south and swishes back up to the northeast.
Right, yeah.
This time, this storm just swooshed down from the northeast and it was the weirdest thing to see on a radar.
Yeah, it was messed up. And there were a lot of power outages and things. And,
yeah, we're still recuperating from that.
Oh, yeah.
The weather's been crazy. A lot of little creatures come out, little bugs. And I thought we were going to have a guest in our studio today.
Uh-oh.
Because last night I was trying to find it. I kept on hearing. I was like,
he's around here somewhere.
There's a cricket in this studio.
Which drives audio techs nuts, by the way. Poor Jeremy. I can't imagine anything.
You can't EQ that. You can't do anything with that, really.
I can just see him being like Walter White in the Fly episode of Breaking Bad, looking for this cricket.
Positive pressure. We need positive pressure. But we have some great news today.
What's that?
We have our first official congratulations.
Excellent.
And I hope the first of many more. You remember our friend Catherine Gonzalez from Puerto Rico?
I do.
She wrote to us saying that she's actually moving to Florida. She's coming to the mainland.
Oh, excellent.
Hoping to continue studying music theory here in the States.
Excellent. Welcome to the mainland.
Yeah. She says, hey guys, just so you know, I passed my music classes 4 straight A's.
Woohoo!
And she sent pictures of her scores. Man, she nailed it.
Oh, yeah.
That was so awesome.
Oh, that's great.
We're actually, we're helping.
We're so proud of you.
Yeah, we are. Catherine, way to go. Bang up job. Keep it rocking.
Absolutely.
We have some more cool stuff here. What shirt am I wearing here, Matt?
That is Pink Floyd from Dark Side of the Moon. Looks like maybe an original tour shirt.
Like 1973.
I wasn't going to say which tour.
Yeah, 1970. Yeah, I got it at Walmart. And it was still the most comfortable shirt that I own to date.
Nice.
Yeah, isn't that funny? But the reason I'm wearing this shirt is because our reviewer here.
Yes.
Is Pink Floyd.
Ah.
Now, I just want to imagine David Gilmour, or Nick Mason, or Roger Waters, one of the remaining members of the band, sitting down. This is really good stuff. I'm going to let them know. But most likely it was not one of the members of Pink Floyd.
You never know.
Well, it says from USA. So,
okay, so maybe not.
But it was a 5-star rating.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
And Pink Floyd says, I just discovered this podcast from a recommendation on another music-related show.
Ooh, wow.
I wonder if that was Musical You.
That would be my first guess.
I'd like to think it was something else because that means other people are talking about us. But,
yeah, it's always nice to think that something has sort of lost your control, that it's coming kind of out into the ether and you don't necessarily know all the conversations going, But
the Musicality podcast and Musical You, we've been really good friends and that we've been kind of cross-promoting each other and helping each other out. So either way, he found it on another podcast. Only being a few episodes in, it has already clarified several music theory topics that I needed to help round out my knowledge. Well-produced, interesting, and full of information if you are a student of music, or like me, you are learning a new instrument and need someone to explain the holes in your music theory knowledge. Definitely happy that I discovered this show. I will be binge listening for the next week or so to get through the catalog, and I'm positive that I will be going back through a few favorite episodes to clarify what I didn't grasp the first time around. Excellent work, guys. Keep up the great show.
Well, thank you so much. That is what we are here for.
Yes, sir.
And if there are any remaining holes after you're done with your binge listen, feel free to email us with questions. We're happy to clarify anything we can.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. You keep up the good work. Learning new instruments, covering gaps in your knowledge. These are not easy tasks. They take time and work and patience. So congratulations.
And I'm really only made aware of these reviews by going to the iTunes every now and again and seeing what they're saying.
Right,
I'm sure that the Stitcher and Spotify, probably other people that do podcasting services. Right. There's probably ways to rate us on that, so check it out.
I think there are, yeah. So definitely check that out.
It only helps.
It only helps. It only helps.
We also have a new patron.
Yes, we do.
Patreon.com is kind of what we're doing now for a monthly subscription donation.
Yeah.
And we got a new guy here, Matt Chung.
Matt Chung, who is a software engineer for Amazon. Mm-hmm. Oh wow! I wonder if he can get me a job.
Right?
He lives in Seattle, Washington, and he was raised in California.
Oh, okay.
And he found us on Reddit.
Okay.
I didn't know we were on Reddit.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
He's like the second person that told us that. So.
Wow. That's almost scary.
I should go read Reddit.
But he has said that he enjoys our recaps and our digressions.
How about that?
We really appreciate that. We enjoy our digressions, but we worry that other people don't enjoy them as much as we do. So,
it seems to be working.
Yeah. So thank you for the reassurance.
We'll have to start writing digressions into our notes.
Yeah, just a little in parentheses digression.
Because we haven't had a good digression in a long time, I don't think, have we?
Well, if you don't count the one we just had in getting ready for the show, which was a fairly major one.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, for all the digressions you guys hear, you just have no idea.
No idea
how digressed we can get.
So what's Matt have to say?
Well, Matt says, "Hey Matthew and Jeremy, I just want to say thanks for the amazing music theory podcasts you two developed. So far, I've listened to about 18 episodes. Oh, it's just getting good, huh? Mm. Listening to them back to back during a recent road trip from Seattle to Los Angeles, an 18-hour drive with my wife and our two dogs that allowed me to play the episode through our car's speaker system." Oh, that's great.
Now let's talk about, again, last episode we had a listener who said, I think it was Matthew Frederic.
Yeah.
Who said his can only have the instruments his girlfriend will.
That his girlfriend will allow him to. Yeah.
And it looks like Matt Chung's wife is very cool also.
Very cool about this. Yeah, if she's willing to listen to a podcast from Seattle to Los Angeles, that's above and beyond the Call of Duty right there.
It sounds like 18 hours of us nerding out.
Yeah, exactly. So he continues, the podcasts clarified so many concepts that I've been learning. In particular, I loved the episode on how to listen for chord inversions, carefully listening to the perfect fourths when the chord is inverted. Yeah, neat trick, huh? Neat trick. Yeah. I recently immersed myself in music theory in addition to taking singing and guitar lessons this past year. I'm 30, and up until recently, I've never been really exposed to the art. Never creating and never studying music until now, and I must say, it's all so beautiful. Isn't it just, though?
It is.
Music will become your life before you even realize this happened. I love how theory, not laws and not rules, and yes, we're very much in agreement on that, Matt. I love how theory can be applied, allowing myself to communicate with other musicians, and above all, allowing me to tap into my creative side by establishing a solid foundation that guides that creativity. Well, it sounds like Matt has stepped into a whole great, huge, wide world, and we love to see that. We all live in that world, and it's a fascinating place.
That was very well put, Matt, and very well put, Matt Chung. Both Matts. Great job, man. Yeah, Matt, thanks again for your donation, buddy.
And thank you so much. Yeah.
All right, what else is new today before we get into this episode?
Listener mail.
Listener mail, okay. Hey, in the Overtone series, we kind of talked a little bit about the sitar and the tambura.
That sounds like us.
Yeah, and then we also briefly spoke about how I got to see Ravi Shankar and his daughter Anushka at the site in the sight reading episode.
Yep.
Briefly. Well, this is kind of appropriate because this next listener, Norman Fernandez, born and raised in Darjeeling, India. He said, this is our first India person. This is our first person from the country of India.
Wow, first India person ever.
Yeah.
Awesome.
He says he's been learning keyboard for the last 4 years. He says, I've been listening to the podcast on Spotify. Please don't ever stop talking about music. Thank you. Regards, Norman.
Thank you, Norman. And don't worry, I don't envision a life of mine in which I ever stop talking about music.
Yeah, right? It's not just for the podcast.
It's not just for the podcast.
When me and Matt hang out, it is conversation ultimately turns towards that.
The only real difference in the podcast is the mics get turned on.
Right.
But thank you all for all of that listener mail. Thank you to all our Patreons. We really appreciate your support. This podcast is it's a labor of love, but it does cost a certain amount to create every week or every 2 weeks. So we really appreciate your help in helping us to keep doing that.
Your donations help financially, and then it helps our heart.
It helps our heart.
When you just write us letters and let us know what's going on in your life and how you found us and what we're doing to help you out.
Yeah, a little bit of good feelings sent our way, always appreciated.
And another note, if you've written me and you haven't heard back, hang in there. I have
Jeremy is busy.
I have a colored flag system in my inbox. Yeah. And you have a red flag with your name by it if you haven't heard back from me. If you've heard back, you have a green flag. All the colors in between.
So we are going to do our best. Yeah, Jeremy is very, very busy. He has to work and make a living on top of this.
It is, yeah.
And I help him zero with this stuff. So
well, zero might be a little harsh. You help out in so many other ways back there. But I guess the other point was, let's see here. If you've written to us and you haven't heard your name mentioned on the episode, that might mean that you haven't gotten back to me. Usually I go ahead and get consent from people who I want to.
Right. We will always ask before we call out your name and read your comments over the airwaves.
Exactly. So get back to us if you want to participate. And otherwise, I just appreciate your letting us know that you're out there.
Absolutely. It's been great. It's very exciting. So what have we got for today?
Well, episode 45, we did Secondary Dominance Part 1.
I remember.
And that was the focus on that was the 5 of 5 and the 5 of 4 chords.
Right.
Now, because there's not a whole lot more of these, I mean, we figured we could probably just wrap it up on this Part 2 episode.
There are other secondary dominants. It is a similar concept.
Yeah. So a lot of the theory concepts we covered on Part 1, right?
Yeah, and if and we'll try to just go back over them briefly. If you don't feel super up to speed on what a secondary dominant is or how to build one, then I would suggest definitely go back and listen to episode 45, and hopefully you'll have a sense of being pretty straight after that. So.
Right, because we got a lot of the theory out of the way in that episode. We're going to use our ears a little bit more on this episode.
Yeah, let's hope so.
It won't be like a melodic or harmonic dictation exam for me, sadly.
Yeah, because Jeremy loves those.
But you are going to quiz me on a couple of things, so I'm kind of looking forward to it.
Yes.
Sharpening my ears.
And the reason it's not going to be a huge ear training thing, most college music students, I'm going to go out on a limb here and make an assumption, but from my experience, it's fairly rare that you ever actually get dictated on secondary dominance beyond 5 of 5 and 5 of 4.
Okay.
And maybe 5 of 6 and 5 of 2, which we'll talk about today, but not super much. It seems much more important to have harmonic dictations on other things that we'll talk about very soon. But they are always covered in theory courses, and they do definitely happen in the repertoire, and they're kind of an important step. Because these secondary dominants are chromaticism, what amounts to using notes that are not in the major or minor scale of the key that we're playing in. We're bringing in notes from outside those 7 notes to create chords that we wouldn't be able to with just those 7 notes. So it's kind of a big step forward in your theory thinking. It's a big step forward in sort of the evolution of classical music.
And how appropriate as we near episode 50.
How appropriate indeed, as we've almost done 50 episodes.
Can you believe it?
I cannot. It's incredible.
Rock on.
Yeah. So anyway, as we talked about in episode 45, a secondary dominant is essentially taking any diatonic chord, that is any chord whose root is a note of our scale, and tonicizing that by putting in front of it its own 5.
Yeah.
So, for example, I feel like being an E major today, so, we have this, and if we were going to play the 5 chord, the note built on scale degree 5, it would, of course, sound something like this. And if we wanted to have a secondary dominant that briefly tonicizes that chord, we might try a 5 of 5, which would be, if I'm in the key of E major, our 5 is going to be B. That makes our 5 of 5 F sharp, from which we will move to 5. And then presumably from 5, we can always go back and hit that 1.
Yeah.
So secondary dominant is just creating a 5 of a diatonic chord.
Yeah.
And we talked about 5 of 5. We talked about 5 of 4.
Right.
What these amount to is making major minor 7 chords, either major chords or dominant 7 chords, 5s or 5 7s, out of other chords we already had. For example, that 5 of 5 there. I just
in the key of E, right?
In the key of E.
Yeah.
This is just F sharp, which is of course the 5 that goes to B. Yeah, and then back to good old good old E. That was just a 2 chord, which F sharp, which diatonically in this key would have been minor, right? Yeah, and then and would do the same thing, just making that chord major.
Just a 2-5-1 progression, right?
Yeah, except instead of 2, it is now 5 of 5.
Right, because it's a major 2 instead of a minor 2.
Right,
which is not in the diatonic scale.
Not in the diatonic scale. We have taken scale degree 4, this A natural, and we have moved it up to A sharp, which is just a half step away from scale degree 5, right? So, right?
Yeah.
And then back to E major.
And you'll see that A sharp, that note, right, the sharp next to the note on the paper.
Yeah, it'll be an accidental.
It won't be in the key signature.
Right. Well, it's not in the key signature, right? E major having 4 sharps, A is not one of them.
No.
We are in we are stepping into the world of chromaticism here. We are taking that A sharp that we don't have and using it to create this 5 of 5 chord.
So the 5 of 5 is the most common of these secondary dominants, it seems.
I would say so.
Right, okay. And then the other one we talked about was the 5 of 4, which can be a little tricky.
Can be a little tricky only because it is a major 1 chord.
Yeah.
Right? So if I was in the key of E and moving in this very, very almost too basic, kind of boring 1 to 4, situation, and then I could, this one could also be considered 5 of 4 because it is tonicizing. It is the 5 moving up to A. If you wanted to really highlight its 5 of 4-ness rather than its 1-ness, you might consider making it a 5-7 of 4. And then that same thing could happen. I should have picked an easier key to play in. There we go. Yeah. So it is making a 5 or a 5-7 again out of some other chord and acting as a substitute for it. So 5 or 5-7 of 5 can act as a substitute for 2.
Right.
5-7 of 4 is sort of a substitute for 1 in our circle of fifths progressions.
Right.
In fact, you might notice, whereas 2 moves to 5, 5 of 5 moves to 5, whereas 1 moves to 4 if we're going clockwise on the circle of fifths.
Right.
5/4 moves to 4. So it's just taking the chord 1 back from where you're wanting to go and making a secondary dominant out of it.
And this theory we're talking about here is based on Western classical music, right?
It is very, very much based on Western classical music. And if you went through even a cursory listen to our, was it 3-part series on counterpoint?
Yeah.
You'll know that all of these rules of chord progression and tonal harmony had their genesis in counterpoint and in the very careful treatment of dissonances.
Mm-hmm.
And we have gotten to the point with chromaticism where we're talking about very, very significant dissonances. We're basically creating a leading tone that leads to any note.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas the leading tone, aka scale degree 7 in the major scale, is a half step away from tonic, and it wants to push towards that tonic. Mm-hmm. We are now just creating a leading tone that wants to push to any note in our scale.
Yeah. Because where there's a secondary dominant, there will be a secondary leading tone.
Exactly right. Exactly
You'll
right.
hear a leading tone function that is not the leading tone that you know also well.
Yeah. It's just a note that is functioning in the same way, and that leading tone will want to push to that note in the same way. And this is sort of how classical music has worked, and this is how chromaticism was introduced into this sort of counterpoint system over many, many years. Mm-hmm. You know? But still with and by years I mean centuries really, but in a very systematic, codified way. If you're playing jazz, obviously, sometimes a major minor 7 chord on the tonic is no big deal.
Yeah.
You're very often just sort of creating chords, not because you're worried about the rules of counterpoint, because they just sound good.
Right. Yeah. So that's why I wanted to specify classical westernized music versus 20th century music.
Versus 20th century music that likes to think of itself as breaking the rules, although arguably, I think that very often those things are conforming to the same rules. We just don't necessarily, we're just not necessarily thinking of it as counterpoint. But you can say, well, a major minor 7 on 1 is just fine because I'm playing rock. But then let me go to a 4. Oh, look how good that sounded.
Yeah,
well,
right.
That was a 5/7, a 4 moving to 4, which would be a very acceptable classical music chord progression.
I mean, there could be a jazz number in B flat that starts off with B flat 7.
Absolutely.
And doesn't even go to the 4 after that, right?
It could do that.
It could do that.
Yeah.
Because they're not following the same rules. Suggestions.
So they're not always following the same suggestions, but how many jazz tunes that start off with a B flat 7 are going to move to an E flat 7 afterwards?
Maybe a good number.
A good number, right? Yeah. These rules tend to mean more than we think they do.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Okay, so let's just finish up a few of these theory-related things before we get into the chords, right?
Okay. So we have 5 of 5, most common. Substitute for a 2 chord.
Yep.
Have a 5 of 4, which is built off of 1 chord. That's why if you really want to think of it as a 5 of 4, you will often add a flat 7 in addition, so make it a 5/7 of 4. Mm-hmm. So if this was in minor, we'd have to do a cut. We'd have to actually raise scale degree 3 to make it a major chord, to make it a 5 of 4, right? Pretty, huh?
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
So yeah.
So you'll know in a minor key, you'll know pretty soon when you hear that 5 of 4, right?
Yeah. And obviously, it's always some gray area in minor key with scale degree 7. Is it sharp? Is it not? But you would definitely use the natural 7, which is actually diatonic. Whereas in major we had to lower that, right, to make a 5/7. So you would
So we got a 1.
This is 1, and we're just going to make this one a 5/7 of 4. 2 4. 2 5/7 1.
Now we're back in minor.
Yeah, I kind of took a little detour there for a minute, right?
We didn't leave the key, right?
Did not leave the key. And these are not really about, we're not leaving the key.
Yeah.
That's kind of important. We're just kind of going outside of the key to a little bit to create more interesting harmonies and more interesting chord progressions and things that can lead us temporarily towards one of the chords in our key before that chord can then move on through the progressions of the key.
Mm-hmm. These secondary dominant chords can also aid in voice leading tension, right?
Yeah, well, that's really their whole reason for being.
Their whole purpose.
About it. Yeah, is to create chromaticism, and often chromatically ascending or descending lines.
Mm-hmm.
And in so doing, create greater amount of tension, which is when then resolves in a more satisfactory way.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of that, speaking of voice leading a counterpoint, if you did listen to counterpoint episodes, part 1 through 3, you would have heard a lot of little rules and a lot of rules, guidelines.
Yes, and those rules generally still apply. Voice leading rules still apply. Avoid parallel fifths. Avoid parallel octaves. The resolution of dissonances. The leading tone should always resolve up.
Mm-hmm.
That still applies. And when it's a secondary leading tone from a secondary dominant, it still has to resolve up a half step.
Leading tone's gonna go up a half step.
It just is.
It just is.
At least in classical music, and arguably in general. I think we all hear that pull towards moving it up a half step, into a realm of greater consonance.
And with that technique, they can often be a great tool for modulations, which we will get into.
Which we will discuss. Yeah, there is, because we're sort of murkying the waters in terms of what our 7 notes are, what our key is with these kind of things. With any chromaticism, the waters get a little murky, right?
Yeah.
The dominance of that tonal center becomes a little murky when you're sort of creating secondary tonal centers, right? So because of that, these are great resources for changing key.
Yeah.
And we don't have to change key, but we definitely can and can just be in a different key for a while, and it's a great way to do that. Stay tuned for a discussion of those.
Because that's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about a brief moment in time.
Right, yeah, because before we use secondary dominants to change key, we're going to use secondary dominants to add some color and flavor to whatever key we happen to be in.
It's a great way to embellish a transition from one chord to the next.
Absolutely.
Adding that extra thing in there.
Absolutely. Just makes it more interesting. So that is the basic concept of the secondary dominant.
Yeah.
If we went through that a little fast, definitely go back and check out episode 45, where we spend the whole episode basically laying out the theory behind what a secondary dominant is.
Or back it up and play it in 0.5 speed.
Or back it up and play it at 0.5 speed, yeah.
And we will explain it to you very slowly. I guess we don't go down pitch. We just talk the same, only a little bit slower.
Right, which is weird, right?
It is totally weird. I wouldn't recommend it.
So there's that.
Okay. Well, let's talk about how I might spell a secondary dominant.
Very good suggestion. So with any chord that you want to sort of prolong this chord by having a secondary dominant in front of it, or place greater emphasis on this chord by having a secondary dominant in front of it, or for whatever reason, let's be an E major. Do you want to just give me a random chord to make into a?
Let's do this. Let's go ahead and talk about the three steps.
Okay.
And then you can quiz me on maybe 2 or 3 examples.
Okay.
Hey,
So
find me a 5 of something. You know what I mean?
So what you would do is you first want to find the root of the chord you're trying to tonicize.
Okay. Step 1.
Yeah. So for example, in finding the root of the 5 chord, if we're in E major, this is our 1, this is our 5. Our root is scale degree 5, B.
Yeah.
Right. So find the root of that.
Okay.
And then you want to go up a perfect fifth.
Second step.
Yes, step 2, go up a perfect fifth. Now it has to be up a perfect fifth.
Uh-huh.
Right? not a diminished fifth.
We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah. But you can go up a perfect fifth or down a perfect fourth. You'll land on the same note. But go up a perfect fifth from that note. And in this case, we land on F sharp. That F sharp then is the root, and I'm just going to go down to keep us. That F sharp is the root of our secondary dominant.
Yes.
Of our 5 of 5.
Right.
So then we're just going to spell a major triad or a major minor 7. So a major triad from F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp. Notice that the A sharp is that raised scale degree 4.
Which does not occur in E major.
Which does not occur in E major, which you're going to have to use an accidental on the score or whatever. If you wanted to make a 5/7, we would also be having that tonic note E in it. And then that is going to move to 5, which then moves to 1. So try to do it a little more smoothly. So 1, 5, 7 to 5, to 5, to 1.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Based on what I just observed, does the 5 of 5 weaken the dominant function of the 5 itself? Because it sounded almost like when we landed on 1, I was like,
My answer is yes.
Yeah?
It does kind of, because you're tonicizing a note other than the tonic.
Yeah.
Right? You're making a 5 to 1 this is coming from somewhere else. And so yeah, it can do that. Now part of the obvious nature of that is, my bad counterpoint, and there it doesn't have to be is overtly weakening the tonic is what I just played, especially because, as we said before, all inversions of a secondary dominant are also fair game, right? So you can have a 5/6, 5 of 5, and things like this that will weaken the dominant function of the 5 chord less than what I just played. But yes, in some sense, it does kind of weaken the tonic to dominant relationship. These kind of things, chromaticism tends to do this, and eventually this kind of leads to sort of the breakdown of all of these rules. Right. The reason you never heard about all the rules of counterpoint before we said them in the podcast, sort of, is because at some point this all got so crazy that the idea of key got really, really weak and really, really almost not a thing for a long time.
Okay, I just had a random question come to my head that I don't think I saw in the theory books.
Okay.
Maybe I just skipped it. Maybe I just didn't. I don't know. But either way, this is a pretty good question, I think.
All right.
Can you have a 5 of 5 that resolves to a 5/7 instead of a 5?
As long as you are obeying all the rules of counterpoint, yes, that can absolutely happen. Can and does happen.
So you're saying you can tonicize a major minor 7 chord?
Yeah, you can. Because it's remember that it's not the real tonic, right?
Right. Okay.
So yeah, you can.
There's only one royal tonic.
There's only one royal tonic.
There's tonicizing
until there no longer is.
Yeah.
and then still on some level there always will be.
Okay.
But yeah, and I'll try to make this chord progression a little stronger this time. So
okay.
But I will go 1, 4, and then I'm going to go to 5 of 5. And then I will try my luck at 5/7. Yeah, and then 1. And I did a little finagling up here on the right hand to keep my voice feeling pretty solid. But yeah, totally acceptable. And you can go 5/7 of 5 to 5/7. Also still a thing. You can go to a cadential motion, right? 1/6/4 to 5/7 kind of deal. It's still definitely a thing. In fact, a lot of what secondary dominants do that's really cool is create the possibility for a lot of chromaticism and a lot of sort of chromatic lines going up or going down.
Uh-huh.
For example, in 5/7 of 5, the 7 chord is going to be the tonic, right?
Okay.
Which then in 5 is going to go down to the leading tone and then back up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in in that example, one of my voices actually went so from scale degree 3 G sharp
Uh-huh.
up to A,
Uh-huh.
yeah, up to A sharp, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, and then back down to A,
Ah.
yeah, to create the 5/7 to
Which resolves down.
yeah. So
All chromatic.
yeah, and that's why we do a lot of these.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Very interesting.
yeah, absolutely, it is.
Okay, so we talked about the 3 steps of spelling a secondary dominant. If you were to ask me to spell a secondary dominant, I would do
Right.
these 3 things, right?
Right.
Number 1, I would find the root of the chord that we want to tonicize.
Find the root of the chord we want to tonicize.
Number 2, go up a perfect fifth from that note or down a perfect fourth.
Right. You'll land on the same note whether you do either one of those.
Octave apart, one way or the other.
Yeah.
And then finally, step 3, spell a major triad or a major minor 7
From that note.
from that very note.
Yes. And keep in mind that this will have to go back to that original root you found in step 1.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the idea. Although it doesn't have to, but that's the idea.
Right. Okay, so that's how you spell or build a secondary dominant.
Indeed, yeah.
Let us talk about identifying a secondary dominant.
Right.
When you encounter an altered chord.
Right, yeah. Well, the first thing, I suppose, is to recognize when you're looking at something chromatic. And that's pretty easy. There's going to be accidentals there. In recognizing something that you hear as chromatic, it's going to sound richer and fuller and less just musical example-y. I mean, so when
That Greek word for chroma is color, right?
right, yeah,
It adds another color.
Yeah, it's got more color from compare bland old no chromaticism diatonic 1-4-5-1. And we can add a little color if we want to go 2-6-5-1.
1, 2, 6,
2 to 5, yeah.
5.
Right. And but when we get into like 5 of 5 territory,
Whoa.
yeah, right.
That sounded cool.
Yeah, yeah. You hear that, kind of that almost bendy, full kind of, yeah.
Okay, I know it's kind of crazy putting all this together on the fly, but can you just play this back to back real quick? Can we hear like 1, 2, 6, 5 to 5 to 1?
Yes.
And then 1, 5 of 5 to 5 to 1, right?
So 1, 2, 6, 5, to 5, 1.
Okay.
1, 5, 6, 5 of 5, 5, 1. Pretty cool, huh?
Very cool.
Yeah. So, when looking at these on the page, is there chromaticism? Is there accidentals? Are there notes not from the key? And
Right.
listening to those, are there? It sounds like that we stepped out of the key somewhere.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
we're not in Kansas anymore.
We're not in Kansas anymore. Yeah.
And we're in the tornado.
Yeah. Then, in looking at it, is there could this be a major minor 7 chord? So, if that chord, if you see that altered chord, then it's going to move to a note that is a perfect fourth above or a perfect fifth below.
Yes.
Right? The inverse of our creating is our finding.
Yes.
Right? So it's going to go to a note that's a fifth away from that. And then, you ask yourself, would the major or minor chord built on this note be a diatonic triad?
Right.
And if it is, then what we have is a secondary dominant that has briefly created chromaticism around a note in our scale.
Right. As it tonicizes said chord.
As it tonicizes said chord.
The following chord.
Yeah. Which is not necessarily the tonic. The 5 of 1 is just 5, right?
So to put all these three together real quick, it would be, when you hear a chord, is it a major chord or a major minor chord, right?
Yes, yep.
Because if it's a minor chord, it's not going to be a 5.
It's not going to be a 5 of anything. It's a minor chord.
Or diminished chord, forget about it.
Well, stay tuned.
We'll get into sevenths, or the leading to,
Stay tuned.
Secondary sevenths or whatever. And then you find the note a perfect fifth below the root of this altered chord. Mm-hmm. Right? And then would the major or minor chord built on that note be a diatonic triad?
Yeah.
It'd be in a diatonic triad in this key.
Yeah. The point is, you're just asking yourself, could this be a 5 or 5/7 chord that is resolving to a diatonic chord? A chord that's in our key that we're in. Whatever that may be.
Great.
Yeah. And like I said, these chords are designed. These chords are designed to harmonize the introduction of chromatic lines. Very, very often, our example where we went from G sharp to A, to
A flat.
to C, to A sharp, back down to A, back down to G sharp. This was why these things started happening. Really, it's the chromaticism that's important. Mm-hmm. We're taking a good old normal scale and saying, well, why can't I, kind of notice in there.
Mm-hmm.
We're coloring it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice.
All right. So you can use a secondary dominant to tonicize almost any diatonic chord.
Almost?
Almost. Let me show you what I mean. First of all, we know we can tonicize the tonic, right? We do that with just good old 5.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The next one up, the 2 chord, we can tonicize that with a 5 of 2 chord. A 5 of 2 chord is a major triad or a dominant 7/7 chord built around scale degree 6.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's only one 5 of 2. It's the one that happens in the major mode.
That's good news.
That is good news. And that's because in the major mode, 2 is diatonically a minor chord.
Uh-huh.
In the minor mode, 2 is diatonically a diminished chord.
Right.
And generally, we can't use secondary dominants to resolve to diminished chords.
Okay.
Diminished chords themselves have to resolve into major or minor chords. It's a perfect fifth thing.
Their function is transitional.
Their function, it itself is inherently transitional. So you can't have a chord that's transitioning to a transition.
Right.
Right. It's just got to be sort of a transition.
Okay.
And again, like I said, it has to do with there being a perfect fifth, which there isn't one in a diminished chord. And this goes back to those rules of counterpoint about dissonances and consonances and things like that. But yeah, so the only 5 of 2 there is the one in the major mode that is built around scale degree 6. So if I'm still in E, then my 5 of 2 chord is going to be built on C sharp, right? Because we take 2, which is F sharp. We go either a perfect fifth up or a perfect fourth down and land on C sharp and build a major triad out of C sharp.
Right.
C sharp, G sharp, C sharp, E sharp, and G sharp. Right? So this is going to be our 5 of 2 chord, which is going to resolve to 2 which is, in its own right going to resolve to 5, and then eventually resolve to 1. There we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
So, 502, built around scale degree 6. And like many secondary dominants, the 5/7 is very often used to facilitate chromatic motion.
Okay.
For example, in this particular case, if I start on 1, right, and I move to 5/7, this E is going to become E sharp. Right, so, right? And then if my 502 then moves as it would to 2, that E sharp is going to become F sharp.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that F sharp can just stay where it is for 5/7. And then 1. But notice what I did with the E to E sharp, otherwise known as F, to F sharp.
Yeah.
For that. So good old 1 E. Yeah. 5/7, or just 5/2. Yeah. And then 2. And then then we just have to finish our progression. So yeah. And then whatever. So you see how the point of these actually, we talk about resolution and all that. The point of these is actually to affect chromatic lines. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of helping out that chromatic line.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Harmonizing a chromatic line.
Can we hear what it sounds like to go from a 5/7 to 2 compared to a 5/7 to a 5/5?
Ooh, let's see. Let's see if my keyboard skills are up to this task here.
We can use C major if you want to.
No. See, that would be too easy on me.
Yeah. You like a good challenge, don't you?
So the first one is pretty easy because I just did it. 1, 5/2 to 2. So this is minor 2, right? 2 to 5/7 to 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got that in my head.
All right. Versus 1 to 5/2 to 5/5 to 5 to 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got really kind of wavery in there for a minute, didn't we?
Absolutely.
Because in addition to this sort of chromaticism, we had some chromaticism going down here too. So I'll do. Right, yeah. So there's a lot of chromaticism going in there.
Yeah. And,
Pretty neat, huh?
and just to confirm, that is an acceptable thing to do, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
5/5. I'm sorry.
5/2 to 5/5.
5/5 to 5.
To 5.
Yeah.
To 1.
To 1. Great.
Definitely can happen.
Well, that's a nice little talk on the 5/2 chord. Is there anything else we can cover? We talked about how it only happens in the major key, right?
Only happens in the major key because 2 is a diminished chord in the minor key, and so you can't really have that.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's 5/2.
Yes.
Let's move on to 5/6.
Yeah. So 5/6 is a major or dominant 7 version of a 3 chord.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we went down a perfect 4th or up a perfect 5th from 6, we would land on 3.
Right.
Notice this is still circle of 5th stuff. But so it would be the root of it would be scale degree 3.
Uh-huh.
Now in major mode, this is pretty easy to spot because 3 is diatonically minor in major mode. So if you're in a major key and you come up across a major 3 chord, what you're looking at is a 5 of 6.
It's got to be, huh?
It's kind of got to be, yeah. It's got to be to explain that chromatic alteration.
Okay.
Because you're to make the 3 chord major means you're going to have to raise scale degree 5, right? Yes. Yeah. You're going to have to raise scale degree 5 and raise scale degree 7. And so that's going to give you, a sharp 5 and a tonic and, so absolutely.
Yeah.
That's going to be pretty obvious. In minor mode, it is often just analyzed as a 3 chord because in minor mode, the 3 chord is major.
And the circle of fifths progression would send it straight to 6 after that anyways, right?
Would send it straight to 6 afterwards anyway, yeah. And in that case, it all becomes a little bit about context. Obviously, if it's a 5/7 of 6, you have some leeway, but even then, you're still talking about diatonicism. So a lot of times, you're just talking about context, whether it's a 5/7 of 6 or a 3 chord. My general rule of thumb that I like to follow, if something can be a 5, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
So, if it was 3 going to something else, if it was 3 going back down to 1 or something like that, then I might, be inclined to call it 3.
Right.
I'm real nervous when I see 3 in a minor mode anyway, because I worry that I've, gone to the relative major.
A major 3 chord in the minor mode?
Yeah. That just makes me nervous anyway because there are other things that could have happened, and I worry that one of those things is what happened, and I'm analyzing wrong. But generally, if I can get away with calling something a 5 chord, it's a 5 chord because that's the way you're going to hear it. You're going to hear that dominant to tonic relationship, even if it's a temporary tonic, is secondary dominant to secondary tonic. You're going to hear that relationship as 5 of something to something. More than you're going to hear, we're just moving around diatonic chords.
Yeah.
So for my money, if it can be a 5, it is a 5. So the 5 of 6, so we're in E still. Yeah. So our 5 of 6 chord going to be based off scale degree 3, which in this case is G sharp. So we're going to have G sharp, B sharp, and D sharp. Yeah, right? From our 5 of 6, our G sharp major chord, 5 of 6. Already it sounds weird, right? I mean, if we're supposed to be in E, so 1, 5 of 6, 2, 6, which will itself presumably go to some kind of 2. 2, 5, 2, 1. Getting into some crazy chord progressions now, huh?
It's starting to sound interesting. It still sounds like good music.
Absolutely. It is still good music. We're still obeying all of the rules of counterpoint. Ish, minus my just random fiddling around and missing 1 or 2 or something.
And to quote Dr. Angel, one man's mush is another man's music, right? So yeah, I can't really, it's not fair to say it sounds like good music, but it didn't sound as strange or colored.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It sounds not bland to me.
Yeah.
It's still obeying all those rules, so it still sounds like music as we define it in the context of Western tonal harmony.
Good voice leading.
Good strong tonal center. Just not as bland, maybe. And not as predictable, not as vanilla, maybe, as diatonic chords are. It's got a little more spice in it. It's got a little more texture and more color to it.
Another thing I came across was that the 5 of 6 chord is often good for embellishing a deceptive cadence.
Right. So a deceptive cadence, and remember in a deceptive cadence, we're going to do something like, we're going to go from 1 to 4, right? And then we're going to go to 5. But then instead of going back to 1, we're going to end up in something like 6.
Oh?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I've been deceived.
You have been deceived, right? And then we'll have to keep going with our chord progression to get back to 1. Right. So, and what we do with you can throw a 5 of 6 in there, like so. For example, 1, 2, 4, and then we'll have a 5, and then we will have a 5 of 6, right? Going to 6. Yeah. And again, we have created chromaticism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also a prolongation of the
deceptive cadence. Yeah.
So real quick, can we just hear those back to back?
Yeah. So
Just 1, 4, 5, 6, and then 1, 4.
1, 4, 5, and then 6.
Your standard deceptive cadence.
Yeah. And then 1, 4, 5, 5 of 6, 6.
Tasty.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
So there's the 5 of 6.
There's the 5 of 6. So we have 5 of 2, we have a 5 of 6.
And then the one more that we meant to talk about on this
The one more
episode.
that the one that's left is the 5 of 3.
Uh-huh.
Now the 5 of 3, if we still assume good old E major, which we have all episode, scale degree 3 is G sharp.
Mm-hmm.
If we go down a 4th or up a perfect 5th from that, we will land on D sharp. Scale degree 7.
Uh-huh.
So the secondary dominant of 3 then is a 7. And notice we're just going backward. We're still just going backwards on the circle of fifths, right? So if the circle of fifths being 1, 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1, 3 is just 7 is just 1 back from 3.
Right.
We've done that every single time. So we are on scale degree 7, which is D sharp. We're going to make a D sharp, an F double sharp.
That's where that double sharp comes in.
Yeah, and A. So what we have here is we're raising scale degree 2 and scale degree 4 to create a major triad on D major. Or, if we add regular old scale degree 6 for a 5, 7 of 3. There we go. So, which will then itself have to go to, something crazy like 6. And then, let's just say for the fun of it, let's do 5 of 5. And then 5. And then 1.
Oh.
Yeah.
Way to put it all together, man.
Yeah, so there you go. That is 5 of 3. In the major mode, we're just building it off of that diatonic chord.
A funny thing that happened when we did that was we're taking the chord based on the leading tone, D sharp.
Yeah.
And then we're actually making that into a major chord.
Yes.
Which is why we had to crank up that
F double sharp.
Yeah.
It won't always be a double sharp, but it can be weird. You can get into some weird stuff.
Speaking of weird stuff, let's talk about 5 of 3 in the minor mode.
5 of 3 in a minor mode. Well, in minor, if I was in E minor, then first of all, my scale degree 3 would be G natural, not G sharp. Right? That means that the dominant of that is going to be on D. The flat 7. So think of it as from natural minor. That note. Yeah. And we can still build that major chord. Yeah. That then moves to 3. But and then presumably to 6 and 2. and do all those things. The thing is, in a minor mode, 3 is what we call the relative major.
Yes.
Check back to one of those really super early episodes. I think like episode 7 or 8 or something on minor modes.
Yeah.
Is the relative major. It shares a key signature. So like E minor has 1 sharp, G major is going to have 1 sharp.
Sure.
So very often it is found in the minor mode. 5 of 3 is found in the minor mode for this reason. But very often what is happening is you're kind of changing key there.
Uh-huh.
And this, going to the relative major from a minor mode is the most common thing that you can have happen.
Most common key change.
Yeah, but in most of those examples, we're no longer going to call it 3. We're going to start thinking of it as 1. You might have even heard in that chord progression when I played it.
Yes.
It's hard to keep thinking that you're in a minor mode. It sounded like we had just blossomed out into a major mode.
Yes.
And we could talk about modulations in due course. But in terms of secondary dominance, a 5 of 3 is actually the least common.
Great.
Because it is the most confusing, especially in a minor mode.
Right, because here's another thing. In a minor mode, the 5 of 3 is based on scale degree 7.
Yes.
In a minor mode, the 7 is a major chord.
Yes, already. So it's already a diatonic chord.
So it's already diatonic, it's already major.
Yes.
So how would I know if I'm in minor mode and I see a 7 chord, a major 7 chord?
Yeah.
How do I know that's not just a 7 chord versus a 5 of 3?
It is really hard. Because we're not really adding any chromaticism in this particular case.
Right. Unless you throw a 7th chord.
And again, well, even still, if we were to throw a 7 in it, it would still be diatonic.
No, you're right.
Yeah. Weird. So that we're not adding any chromaticism with the 5/7 of 3. So in general, my rule is if something can be a 5, it is. Mm-hmm. But if you're just going around the circle of fifths and not really adding anything, I would be hard pressed to come up with a good reason to call it 5 of 3 when it's just a diatonic chord.
I would imagine it has something to do with the chord that follows, right? Because if you're in minor and you play a 7 and then you go to 1 after that.
Then you're more likely to call it 7.
7.
Yeah. Whereas if you went to 3, you could maybe make the argument that it's 5 of 3 to 3. But even then, you're just going around the circle of fifths. 1, 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. So even then, it's a tough case. I might would still call it a 5/7 of 3, and given some context. Really, when you hear 5/7 of 3 in a minor mode, it's going to feel like a 5 to 1 in the relative major more than anything. More than anything, that is going to happen. That's the most often thing that's going to happen. So you see why 5 of 3 is not an often used secondary dominant, right? It's kind of a confusing chord to do. 3 messes with you all the time. 3s will just mess you up.
Is it more pesky than the 4 chord?
It is not more pesky than the 4 chord. Okay. Nothing is more pesky than the 4 chord. But the 3 is a close second.
Okay, so just to keep it consistent. Great, man. Well, so can we hear back to back the difference between, or what it sounds like, a 7 moving to 1, as opposed to a 7 acting as a 5 of 3, and then moving
to 3?
Yeah.
All right.
First the 7 to 1.
First the 7 to 1. So we'll go 1, 4, and I'll keep the E in the bass, 4, 6, 4.
Nice.
That's just for the sake of voice leading.
Uh-huh.
So 1, 4, 7 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
Very prog rock.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very almost Dream Theater, or not Dream Theater, but like maybe Emerson, Lake and Palmer or something like that.
Yeah.
By comparison, moving to 3 instead. 1, 4, and we'll do 5 of 3 to 3.
See how my eyebrows went up when you did that?
Yeah, kind of cool, huh? Still sounds very prog rock to me.
Mm-hmm.
We can do 1, 4, and then I'll do 5/7 of 3 to 3. Yeah, which would then go to 6. And then 2, 5. Or we could have made 5 of 5 instead of 2, or, 5 of 2 instead of 6. We could have made any one of those into a secondary dominance by making them major triads instead of their diatonic qualities.
So we've had a unique opportunity to actually kind of listen to the 5 of 2, the 5 of 3, and the 5 of 6, and how they all kind of sound, right?
Yeah.
Now I have a question for you.
All right.
Because I was when I was doing my research for this, I was like, wait a minute. Where's the 5 of 7? I Googled 5 of 7.
Where's the 5 of 7?
So in a major key, this just doesn't happen because the 7 is a diminished. And we talked about this earlier.
Yes. We cannot make a secondary dominant that leads to a diminished chord. And it has to do with a perfect fifth. That's in a major chord or a minor chord. So a major or minor chord can be a temporary one. Any diminished chord, because it is in itself transitional, and it is in itself dissonant and wanting to resolve, it does not make a good candidate for the resolution of a secondary dominant. Ergo, you don't have 5 of 7 to 7 in a major mode.
Because I was trying to make the music for this episode, and I was like, wait a minute, I want to throw a 5 of 7 in there. This is before I did my research. Sometimes I compose the music before I even research this, which is
look
stupid.
at that. Yeah, well, that's the way it's supposed to go. Music happens first, then the theorists come along to explain.
Right, but I have to do it in reverse for this stuff because I want people to hear sometimes that one of the little things I do is you'll hear the examples in the music.
Yeah.
That I said, wait a minute, how am I supposed to make a 5 of 7? And I says, well, say we're in the key of C. Right?
Yep.
Good old C major.
Yep.
That B is going to be the leading tone 7 of 5, right?
Right.
So then I said, wait, okay, a B. Now, if I'm going to make this a 5 of 7, is it going to be the 5 based on the true diminished chord? Which in case it would be F.
Right.
Or rather, yeah.
Right.
Or do I do a fifth above that actual B, which would be, that would be the F. F sharp.
It would be F sharp.
Yeah, F sharp. So all of that doesn't matter because...
all of that's out the window. Yeah, I mean, I guess technically, if you were to conform to these steps we laid out ahead of time, you would have to end up on F sharp. But yeah, really, that kind of doesn't happen.
Yeah.
We don't tonicize the diminished 7 from the major mode, and the flat 7 from the minor mode, that would just be a 4 chord.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And for the same reason, in minor, we can't do a 5 of 2. We can't tonicize that diminished 2 diatonically.
Absolutely.
Speaking in minor mode.
Absolutely, yeah. Because it's a diminished chord. 5 of 7 in a minor mode, that would be a major 4 chord.
So that can happen.
That can happen. I would... And again, everything depends on context, what you want to call it, sometimes. A major 4 chord and minor is a thing that kind of happens anyway. And is a part of our discussion on modal mixture, which will happen very soon. Because we're talking about all this chromatic stuff.
Very good.
Yeah.
And now it is quiz time.
So
basically all we want to do, I think, in this case is just give me three challenges.
Give you some challenges. All right.
I want to build a chord.
Well, first of all, I am sick of E major. Let's be in G major. How about
that's nice, yeah.
Yeah. Kind of sounds like The Office for a minute. All right. See what I mean about digressions?
Hey,
you guys
that was
don't
a nice
even
digression.
hear. Yeah, okay. So let's be in G. So, we are in G, and I would like you to build me a secondary dominant that is going to resolve to scale degree 2.
Okay, so we're in the key of G, and we want to make a 5 of 2 chord.
And we want to make a 5 of 2 chord.
Okay, so I'm going to observe my steps here.
Okay.
Step 1, find the root of the chord you want to tonicize. In this case, we want to tonicize the 2 chord of the G major, so that is an A minor. That will be tonicizing.
Yes.
So now that I had this A minor in my head, I'm going to, the root is A.
The root is A.
So I'm going to go up a perfect fifth. Step 2, go up a perfect fifth.
Yep.
And the perfect fifth from A is E. Also in the key of G major.
Yeah, for what it's worth.
And and then all I do at that point is spell the major triad from that E note.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in the key of G major.
Mm-hmm.
We want to tonicize the chord 2, which is A minor.
Mm-hmm.
So we get this E, and then we spell a major triad from that E.
Which is E.
G sharp, B. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I helped you with your inversion a little bit there.
Thank you.
But yeah, so 5 of 2 in G major. So where is this 5 of 2 going to resolve?
Well, I would imagine it was resolved to a 2, to the A minor.
To the A minor.
Yeah.
Right? Which then itself is going to, can just go on and go ahead and have a chord progression, right? From 2 to 5 to 1.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Very good.
All right. What about a 5 of 6 chord?
Give me a different key. I want a challenge.
Okay. Let's give you a different key. Let's give you D major this time.
D major. 2 sharps.
2 sharps.
Fat Charlie.
Mm-hmm. And this time let's do a 5 of 6.
5 of 6 in the key of D major.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that I want to tonicize the 6th chord.
Right.
Which in the key of D major is B minor. Because D1, E2, F sharp 3, G4, A5, B.
Landed on B.
Okay.
Yeah, which like as you say in the key of D major is a minor chord.
Mm-hmm. B minor. Yeah. Okay. So we're trying to find the 5 of this B minor chord.
Mm-hmm.
So we just go a perfect fifth up or a perfect fourth down from this B note.
Right.
We land on F sharp. So we take that F sharp and we make a major triad or a major minor 7 triad.
Right.
Or major minor 7 chord.
Right.
Yeah. So that would be
F sharp.
F sharp major.
Yeah. Which is
the 5 of 6.
Which is F sharp, A sharp.
Oh, yeah. F sharp, A sharp, C sharp.
C sharp. Yeah. So. And then that is going to move to 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which it itself will move to 2. Which itself will move to 5. Which itself will move to 1.
Very good.
Unless we wanted to throw in a 5 of 5 instead of 2 or what have you, right?
Should we do one more?
One more.
One more.
We are all about the sharp keys today. Let's be an E flat major.
Hoo. There's my one.
And let's just make a 5 of 3.
Wow. 5 of 3 in E flat major, huh?
E flat major.
Jeez. Okay.
All right.
So I know in the key of E flat, I want to tonicize the 3rd scale degree.
Right, which is
G. Okay, that's not a problem then. I got all scared with E flat, but I'm going to take that G and go up a 5th or down a perfect 4th, and I land on D. Boom, take that D chord, make it a major chord, or a major minor 7 chord.
Right.
And you have yourself a 5 of 3.
So D major, D, F sharp, A.
Yep.
Notice we raised the scale degree 2 and scale degree 4 from our key of E flat major. Right? We've raised F natural to F sharp and A flat to A natural.
Yes.
Yeah. Which then becomes our 3 chord. Which, and then can go around a circle of fifths, and we've done that.
Yes. All right. Pretty proud of myself here, Matt.
I'm proud of you too, Jeremy.
Let us give a recap. And I know that we talked about, our first part of this episode was kind of a recap from the secondary dominant episode.
Right.
So we're not going to recap all that theory that we got into.
Yeah.
But I would like to real quick go about the steps for building a 505 chord or a secondary dominant chord.
Right.
So let's just hit that real quick.
Okay.
Again, this episode we were talking about the 5 of 2, the 5 of 3, and the 5 of 6
Right,
chords.
yeah. having talked about 5 of 4 and 5 of 5 in the previous episode, and there not really being a 5 of 7, at least not in the
Yes.
not for any practical purposes.
And that just leaves the 5 of 1, which is just 5.
Which is just 5.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. How might we go about spelling a secondary dominant or building a secondary dominant, which is what we just did, right?
Right.
But there's 3 main steps.
You find the root of the chord you want to... You find the root of the chord you want your secondary dominant to resolve to.
Step 1.
Step 1. Mm-hmm. Step 2, you go up a perfect fifth from that root, or down a perfect fourth.
Mm-hmm.
And the note you land on after doing that, step 3, you either spell a major triad or a major minor 7 chord, a dominant 7 chord, with that note as the root.
With that note as the root.
Yeah, and that major triad or major minor 7 chord will act as a 5 or a 5/7 that tonicizes that original note. Yeah. And the reason we do this in music is to add chromaticism. Because to create major chords on all of these different notes, we have to bring in notes from outside of the original 7 notes that was the scale of our home key. And we get beautiful little kind of
chromatic motion.
Yeah, chromatic motion in multiple voices. And the reason these things existed originally was to be able to have chromatic motion in different voices.
Very cool, man.
So in identifying these secondary dominants, is the chord you're looking at a major chord or a major minor 7 chord? Is the chord you are hearing a major chord or a major minor 7 chord?
And if not?
If not, it's probably not a secondary dominant.
Right.
It is probably something else.
So number 1, it's got to be major. It's got to be...
It's got to be major or dominant 7.
Okay.
It pretty much, although there are exceptions to this too, it has to resolve to the note that's a perfect fifth below it / perfect fourth above it.
Right.
Same note. And then ask yourself, would the major or minor chord built on this note be a diatonic triad in this key?
Yes.
In other words, is that note to which it is resolving diatonic? And if so, then this is very possibly a secondary dominant, resolving to a diatonic root note of a chord.
Right. Very good. Makes sense.
Yes.
Makes sense to me.
Absolutely. And really quickly, while I've got my professor hat on and making sure you know some things, inversions are all fair game.
Oh, yeah.
As long as you obey the rules of counterpoint, 5, 6, 5 of 5, 5, 6 of 2, all of this stuff is still a thing. Deceptive cadences. These notes can resolve a half step up like a 5 going to a deceptive cadence can.
Yeah.
Which is not something we covered. Just know that is a possibility. There's nothing forbidding us from doing that. And also, well, I've got my professor's hat on. The major thing that's important with these is that they allow for chromaticism in our melodic lines.
Right.
So imagine our melodic lines from counterpoint with the added ability to use chromatic notes. And you have the basis for secondary dominance. Yes, they create dominant function of sort of our temporary tonics of a diatonic chord, but the reason we want to do that is to add chromaticism. This is our first foray into using notes that are not in our original scale.
Right. Moving away from Kansas.
Moving away from Kansas.
Getting swept away by the chromaticism tornado.
Yeah. and it's more like a chromaticism light breeze at the moment.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
But it is a light breeze that is, believe it or not, eroding away at the immovable mountain of tonal harmony, and will one day erode it all away.
Yeah, I'm inclined to say our secondary leading tone chords are going to be more of a tornado.
It's going to be a little bit more of a tornado.
Little bit more.
And then the modal mixture will be a little bit more, and then a little bit, and then a little bit more, and a little bit more until we're just going crazy.
F4, F5.
Yeah, until we really are being swept away.
We'll rate our chromatic tornadoes as we go through these episodes.
Good plan. Right now we're at F0.
F0, okay, that's pretty good. That's a light breeze.
It's a light breeze.
All right, then let's just real quick. We'll hit these 3 chords and talk a couple of things about them that we like to know. Okay.
Okay.
So the 5 of 2.
5 of 2. It happens in major because 2 is minor in major. It does not happen in the minor mode in E minor, A minor, or any other minor key because 2 is a diminished chord in a minor key, and we can't have a 5 of a diminished chord.
We can't tonicize.
We can't tonicize a diminished chord.
Yeah.
Because there's no perfect fifth there to tonicize.
Yeah. So
it only happens in a major. It is a substitute for a 6 chord.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Right? So instead of going 6, 2, 5, 1, you could go 5 of 2 to 2, 5, 1.
Great. And that's something we might not have touched on a whole lot in this episode, but yes, a substitution is what all these things are.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what every chord past 1, 4, 5 is, honestly. But yeah. Yeah. So that's 5 of 2. Mm-hmm. 5 of 6. Very often it is analyzed just as a 3 if it's in the minor mode, because then it's major.
Yeah.
Right? And so you could just say 3 going to 6, and you're just going around the circle of fifths. In a major mode, it's a little less confusing because in a major mode, 3 is diatonically minor. So you will have had to raise scale degree 5 to create a 5 of 6.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and just like 5 of 2, 5 of 6 can go to 6. And just like 5 of 2, it's a substitution, this time for a 3 chord. So instead of going from 3 to 6 to 5, 1, you could go 5 of 6 to 6 to 2, 5, 1. Or for that matter, 5 of 6 to 5 of 2, substitute for a 6 chord, right?
Yeah.
5 of 6 to 5 of 2 to 2 to 5 to 1. Or 5 of 6 to 5 of 2 to 5 of 5 to 5 to 1. Right?
Y'all get that?
We're just substituting everything.
It's just one big substitution.
But it does happen. It can happen that way and create some great chromaticism. You know, you can actually create a chromatically descending line that way. It's pretty awesome. It can also embellish a deceptive cadence. So whereas a normal deceptive cadence is 5 moving to 6 and fooling you, you can go from 5 to 5 of 6 to 6. And what that will do is create chromaticism in a line. So, it'll have, a note going a half step up with every new chord. And in so doing create, great little embellishment in that. It sounds really nice. And then there's 5 of 3.
The least common, probably?
Probably the least common. In major mode, it can certainly happen. You are starting with what is scale degree 7, normally a diminished chord. Wow. So you're going to have to raise scale degree 2 and scale degree 4 to make that major. And then move to 3. In minor mode, really, really not common because you're dealing with a chord that is completely diatonic. Yeah. So in minor mode with 5 of 3, you haven't created any chromaticism.
There's nothing new.
Yeah.
No accidentals.
So it's real hard not to just call it 7 to 3, or in actuality, it's really hard not to say, well, are we just in the key of the relative major now?
Right.
Because that's what it's going to sound like.
And the cues that let us know are the chords that follow.
Yes.
For the most part.
It's all about context. And analyzing theory involves some critical thought about some of these things.
Okay, one more random question for you that we haven't touched on in this episode. Can a 5 of chord go to something other than what it was intended to?
What it was intended to go to.
Like, can a 5 of 3 go to a 6 or something like that?
5 of 3 to 6, not so much. But something that can happen, is it can resolve deceptively. So just like a deceptive cadence resolves up a scale degree from 5 to 6, 5 of 5 could resolve up a step, up a scale degree to 3. And it would be essentially the same thing as a deceptive cadence, just with a sort of secondary deceptive cadence. So it can resolve somewhere else. That's a little crazy. That's not super common in most of the repertoire, but you will see that happen. But the general idea is that they are resolving to this sort of temporary tonic.
Huh.
It gets crazy, man. It gets crazy.
And then, of course, we determined also that there's no such thing as a 5 of 7.
And there's no such thing as a 5 of 7. Diminished chord can't have a 5 of a diminished chord.
So in the major key, there's not a 5 of 7. In the minor key, there can be a 5.
In the minor key, sure. But in the major key where that chord is diminished, not so much.
Very good.
Yeah.
All right, man, this was more of a robust episode than I thought it was going to be.
It's intense. It's intense stuff.
But we had a lot of stuff to cover.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. But I think as much as there can be a lot of detail with chords like this, the basic concept is fairly easy to grasp. The basic concept is just creating a 5 that resolves to some diatonic chord other than 1.
Yes. Very good. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Secondary Dominance Part 2.
In a nutshell. And we will have more fun stuff to come. Now that we're stepping into chromaticism, it gets real nuts.
It's going to get nuts.
But it's going to get nuts in a fun way.
In a fun way.
So we'll see you next time in the asylum.
On episode 50.
Episode 50. Woohoo!
Here we come.
Now that you've heard this episode, maybe you can identify some of these chords in some of your favorite music. Write us with examples at info@musicstudent101.com. We love sharing our musical journey, and we want to hear about yours.